So I'll see if this works. If I can just put you down here next to me. I don't know if this is even working. Yeah, it's still recording. Let's see how this goes. You're sliding. Okay, chill there. So, talking about Jesus and Paul. I kind of need my notes. I took some. Let's see. I'll just see what. Try to keep this in 5 or 10 minutes. I guess first, just take a breath. I don't know. This isn't going to do it justice on the phone, but I'm going to take a breath. You're welcome to join me. And one more. So I think what Paul missed and where Christianity, I think, has been steered off, where we could look at it, a different way to look at it, is we've really been in a pretty dualistic view of right and wrong, and a lot of the Bible is Paul needing to know what's going on. And so there's a couple different things that come up, and when I look at all this and put pieces together, consider about how the pieces could fit together, I'm seeing a different picture than where Paul went with it. So two critical pieces of this are maybe what Jesus introduced into the Jewish story is something like a new generation. You can think of the Old Testament story as the first generation. And really it's not the first, but we'll just call it the previous generation, and the next one is what Jesus is introducing. So if you just stay in a biblical story, God creates a people, and we get overly focused on knowing, as is human, we're doing things, incorrectly, imperfectly, which I think is part of the plan. It's not like a failing or a problem. It's part of life. And maybe what Jesus is introducing is kind of like you could see it as the next brother among siblings, or the next generation. And I like the brotherly view, because then you have these two existing alongside each other. You have two children of God, which has similar but different relationships with God. So there's a lot of confusion with all the biblical arguments of, well, what does it mean? Who's following God? Who's the true God? And who's it's a bunch of sort of unnecessary arguments if you allow them to be brothers. And another big part of it, in some ways, the Jews, even these days, Jews take pride, especially observant Jews, take pride in being a slave to God or a slave to the law, as opposed to a slave to yourself or your own ego. But I think what Jesus was introducing is he's coming as a model of being a son of God. So how do you read a set of rules when you're a child who has an inheritance and unconditional love, as opposed to a slave? And so this is captured in a lot of places of Jesus saying Shabbat was created for humans, not that humans were created for Shabbat. It's a lot of the same idea. Doesn't, when you lay this view on top of the questions of like, what do we have to do and who has to do what, I'd say seeing us as all children of God really changes it and the way you would ask the question versus seeing it as slaves of God. And it also, I think, consider like, what if there's actually different expectations of the two brothers? There's like so much focus in the Bible on like the birthrights and whatever of the firstborn, and the story in the New Testament of the prodigal son, or the older brother, which I think is the Jewish people, the Jewish tribe, sticks around and is working on following the law. Like they're going to become the next head of the house. Like you have to know the laws and run the laws and learn. This last 2,000 years of exile, as God kind of gets quiet and is not talking to us with open miracles like he was 2,000, 2,500, 3,500 years ago. Like that's a time of basically like going from adolescence to adulthood, of learning to lead your own life, your own household, which perhaps is a different role for the younger brother, it's not so focused on the law. You know, they're doing something else. The Jews are instructed not to recruit. That's not what we're up to. And that's whatever it means, the fullness of the Gentiles. Part of the role of the Gentiles is to spread this good news, so that I think through the action, the sacrifice, the mechanism that Jesus enacted, there's a different project going on where for this biblical story of God that is open to everyone, that is a path into God's love, whatever that means, that isn't about this specific set of laws that's for this specific set of people. You know, in some sense, there's a difference between, even in the Old Testament, the difference between what the priest's class is doing, where they're in some kind of I don't want to say a closer relationship, but they have certain actions that are more about this interface between God and everyone. And the priests are doing something at that intersection. They're kind of a bridge, a ceremonial bridge, to the rest of the Jewish people in an Old Testament way. And so perhaps you have a similar patterning. Again, it's not a higher or lower role. It's not like God loves the priests more than the people. That's like missing the point of God's love. So yeah, I think Paul got it wrong. And I think the church got really attached to Paul being right. And I don't know, I think Paul can be wrong, and it could still be that the church could be wrong about what Jesus did, and it could still be that what Jesus did was part of the real Jewish story, and that the Jewish story isn't like a complete, it doesn't have to be the only real story that explains what's going on the planet and in the universe and the spirit and whatever uncanny, weird, galactic, multiverse kind of world we live in. Like it's obviously a big story. It's become a prominent story on the planet, but it doesn't have to be the only story in order to be of value. So maybe we're all children of God, and maybe we get to figure out what that means, like the way a child figures out life and adolescence and adulthood, and the way that parents don't know what they're doing when they're parenting. Like, yeah, just maybe we can just breathe. Maybe there's actually room to breathe. And maybe part of this path where it gets a little more metaphysical would be this seed. Like, what does it mean to start a new generation? If Jesus as Messiah, as Son of Man, take this back to the Hebrew, son of Adam. So Adam, before eating the fruit, before the fall, when you go into the mysticism of it, Adam is the whole universe before the Big Bang. Because really the fall is what physicality happens, is where we enter. In some ways, you could see eating the fruit as when the Big Bang happens. And I've got some resources on that I'd love to share. When you put it that way, when you see Adam as pre-creation, this is where, the Christian tradition says Jesus obviously was there. He's part of creation. He was there before creation. In the Jewish tradition, we say that repentance was created before creation. And so if you allow these, even though we have different language for it, if you allow these stories to blend, just like Adam, Jesus is called the second Adam. So on some level, if the Messiah or some path to a global awakening, whatever that means, there's really just two things going on in the story. Is you have essentially a beginning, Mount Sinai of a creation of a people, and Jesus as a new covenant, a new creation, which the Old Testament has these prophecies built in that the Jews will overlook their own Messiah, and that the last 2,000 years are called this era of Messiah. This is an Orthodox view. It's in the Talmud. So what does that mean? The Son of Man, the Son of Adam. It'd be something like, if you think of us as a petri dish, we go through a first generation of growth. And there's something going on through the time leading up to Jesus. And then there's some spark. There's like one new cell that's introduced into the petri dish, and a new wave of 2,000 years of growth. And you get to around the year 2000, which is, there's all kinds of, I think something really happened with Y2K that we think nothing happened, but I think something happened. Because it's right when you hit the age of Aquarius, there's all kinds of astrological stuff. You're right around within 20 years of computers and the global awakening and getting to space, and you're not that far after like microwaves and grocery stores, and obviously we're in this crazy time of COVID and AI, and all of that is within like one or two generations, within one lifetime. All of that crazy has happened. So it seems like we're kind of at a third turning point. There's something else happening here that is a reflection or a next ripple in the story, this next 2,000 years later. So maybe there's just room to breathe. Maybe there's a role for everybody. Maybe Israel actually includes the Jews and whoever else is in relationship with the one loving God, the unified. All of the religions in their mystical layers are referring, even a lot of polytheistic religions believe in a unified force that operates above all of the gods. I think this is what I want to introduce with inner Babel. Is I think in some ways where our languages got scattered at the Tower of Babel, here we are we're awakening to inner Babel. Only 70 years ago that psychoanalysis was started, the whole project of really looking into our own individual humanity in a collective way. It was a pretty new project for us on the planet that wasn't so common. And what we're finding is this infinite depth and connection to the divine. And it's challenging and it's complex and there's fear. And, Jesus asked if God could make the path any easier. And that if God couldn't make the path any easier, that he would still die for it. And he did. This is Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. Jesus is doing what the Jews are doing. There's this huge breakdown between the Jews think that Isaiah 53 is about the Jews. It's describing how the Jews are suffering on behalf of the world. And the Christians see that Isaiah 53 is describing Jesus. And Jesus is the one who suffered on behalf of the world. But it's all one petri dish. The whole project of the Jewish bacteria colony, if you just allow the people to be like part of the global petri dish, the whole point of the Jewish people is to lead to the Messiah. And if you allow Jesus to be part of that 2,000-year process, there's so much to introduce on Moshaich ben Yosef, the first Messiah, and Moshaich ben David is the Messiah that we're all waiting for. And even the Eastern view that the Messiah that's coming is not a person, it's a way of being together. So it's just not all that, it's super hard. It's facing your fears and facing death, and it's just all confusing. But also, if you kind of take a step back and just kind of let your eyes cross, it all kind of lines up. It all kind of can fit together. And maybe we can just breathe. You know?